Hey there, it's Dan Del Fiorentino, the music historian for NAMM. I'm really excited to introduce our next interview from the NAMM Oral History program. It's with Tosin Abasi. Tosin started off with a great passion for music at a young age, developed into the leader for Animals as Leaders, the great band, and is a endorser for Ibanez guitars, kept coming up with ideas of improving and designing instruments. So, in 2017, he started his own company, which has shown at the NAMM show, Abasi Concepts. This is a great story, and I think you're going to enjoy our interview with Tosin Abasi.
I'm Tosin Abasi, and I believe in music.
Perhaps a good place to start is I would, first of all, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure. And it would be really neat, I think, if we could talk a little bit about your passion for music and how that developed. Did you have a lot of music in your house when you were growing up?
Surprisingly, not really, at least not from my parents. Both of my parents are from Nigeria, and I know my mom had a few cassette tapes of, basically like worship music, like religious music. But yeah, it was kind of like high life, this genre of high life. It's very upbeat and celebratory music. But I remember she would play, King Sunny Ade and Ebenezer Obey, and I remember hearing that stuff through the house. But I didn't really like it. It sounded too happy, so that wasn't really a direct influence. Yeah, but I actually in elementary school they had an orchestra program, and so I was learning the clarinet as early as the third grade, and it transitioned into guitar just because I wanted an instrument that was more relevant to the stuff I was seeing on MTV and hearing on the radio and stuff like that.
That's cool. Tell me a little bit about your experiences with music teachers and band directors and that kind of thing. Did you have good experiences there?
Yeah, actually, I had a really good experience with my music teacher in elementary school, Mark Amberg, and he is just enthusiastic about music, and I felt seen as an individual in the classes as well. And when I mentioned I wanted a guitar, he recommended an entry level book and a music store where to go and get it. And so yeah, I think good teachers, especially early on, can be really integral in guiding young students.
I was going to ask you about music stores in your neighborhood growing up. Do you remember any of them?
Yeah, so I bought a guitar. So Victor Litz, it was a local music store in the Maryland area, and Chuck Levin's Washington Music Center was another music store in the DC area. And I was kind of that annoying kid who would go into the store and hang out for a while and try out guitars that I obviously couldn't afford. And what was cool is that they kind of knew, and they would let me, I'd ask to try something that I, literally couldn't ever afford. And but I guess they saw that I was, enthusiastic and maybe had some talent. And so they would tolerate, me sitting in there for an hour plugging into stuff. And yeah, it was really fun, actually. I'm glad that the brick and mortar store thing was a pretty important experience to a young, musician.
And boy, Washington Music, talk about a crazy place, right?
Yeah, they're a fantastic independent music store. And, I really appreciate stores that are unique and distinct. Guitar centers are great. They're necessary when you need it. You need a music store. Maybe you're on tour and you need to grab something. It's nice that they have a national presence, but I do have a soft spot for independent music stores.
Yeah, awesome. That's well said. So
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about how you saw your career develop.
Man, a lot of it was a lot of practice and a lot of dreaming. Um, a lot of my heroes were just virtuosic guitar players, like guys like Steve Vai and John Petrucci and Yngwie Malmsteen. And so part of it was like, will I ever be this good? Will I ever be as good as my heroes? And there's also the part of no matter how good you are, it's still a roll of the dice if you can turn that into a viable career, you know. So I always think about how a lot of successful musicians likely have a personality or trait that allows them to be open to a level of risk and uncertainty, because the percentage of musicians who can make a living out of it is definitely smaller than the percentage of musicians. And there's all this talk when you're young about not putting all your eggs in one basket and having a backup plan. And, you know, luckily I was sufficiently insubordinate and confident and just open to the risk and open to sleeping on friends' couches and, you know, being broke for years. It paid off.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good attitude though. I mean, that you're right. That's an important concept that people need to get through. It kind of reminds me of what Quincy Jones used to say is, you know, if you're asking if you should have a backup plan, then you shouldn't be doing this. You know, you either go for it or you don't.
Yeah, you know, it's pretty spot on, and it's scary. I mean, you know, but I know for myself, I don't think I would have been happy working a day job for someone. Like music is that valuable and important to me that I felt it was worth the risk and worth putting my life energy into.
So what was what do you consider your first professional gig?
That's a good question. I had a band called Reflux in the early 2000s, and we got signed to Prosthetic Records, and we were doing some national touring and stuff like that. And I ended up with a guitar endorsement, and you know that felt pretty professional, you know. So yeah, I would say that was around 2000, 2003 and 4.
You know, I forgot. We should back up a second. I'd love to talk to you about your gear and how that progressed. What was your first guitar?
Um, my first guitar was a Strat knockoff called a Saturday Night Special. And I talked my dad into buying me a guitar, and neither of us knew much about it. And, you know, this thing was pretty funny. Like, I've never heard of the brand or seen it since. And so I don't really know where it came from. But it was my first electric guitar. And yeah, I kind of wish I still had it. That'd be pretty funny.
So what did you progress to?
Oh, from there, I remember I got an Epiphone Les Paul thing, and then I remember getting my first Ibanez RG, and that felt like kind of like getting a sports car or something. It was everything about it was a bit more precise, and the neck was thinner, and it had a floating tremolo. And I remember feeling like I had a professional instrument at that point. That was like in middle school. Yeah. And then from there, I kind of stuck with the Ibanez for a while, but began adding strings. So I got into the 7-string guitar. I remember I had an RG, and then I got an S series 7-string, and I started getting into swapping out pickups. So I started buying DiMarzio pickups, and I later became a DiMarzio artist, actually. And then that started to continue in the trajectory of adding strings. So 7 strings became 8 strings. And I ordered, there was a period in time where you couldn't really get an 8-string from a major manufacturer. So you'd have to find a luthier on the internet and order a custom built, 8-string, and it would take however many months, and you'd choose the woods and all that stuff. So I did that, and I had a Strandberg and a Rick Tune, and this kind of got me into the ergonomic sort of custom guitar world. And yeah, I became an Ibanez artist officially, and was with Ibanez for like 10 years. So that was kind of essentially where I landed and where home was until I started Abasi Guitars.
Yeah, that's really, really fantastic. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because at the same time, your musical career is taking off.
Yeah. Yeah. The touring with Reflux was cool because it was that groundwork of playing gigs in every city, and then it became even international. And I just got on the radar of some people. This is as the internet and social media was becoming like more and more popular and like a direct tool for musicians. So I remember we made a MySpace, and I remember tripping out on reading the comments of the show we just played. It was just so novelty to me. It was really cool. And then once YouTube became a thing, I would just upload things I was working on, and a lot of that stuff gained a lot of traction. I did a video with EMG TV, and that ended up getting like a couple million views. And so it was cool to see people responding to my playing online. And I really was, I was taken aback that you could put something up on this platform, and then you check back a week later and there's like maybe 10,000 people have looked at it, and you're just like, whoa, like what is going on? Now it's like a thing everyone knows and consciously manipulates. But I remember back then, it was just like, it was novelty. Yeah.
Well, and also it's sort of interesting to me, the development of your own style. I mean, now you have a very recognizable style. Was that something that you sought out to do, or just sort of progressed?
Yeah, it's a good question. Once I became good enough to emulate my influences, I definitely realized that I was influenced by people who had very unique voices. So I think most of the people we elevate to the level of, iconic, they made a contribution to music that was very distinct and individual. And so I know I felt as a young guitarist, I wanted to be one of those, distinct individuals who contributes a new perspective to guitar. But it was a result of learning from a bunch of these iconic individuals, and then kind of mutating that stuff and just adding a percentage of original thought to it. So, I am a mixture of all my biggest influences, and I'm glad it sounds distinct and original, because that's literally what I wanted.
Yeah, that's really cool. Tell me a little bit about how Animals as Leaders came about.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I was in a band called Reflux, and we were signed to Prosthetic Records. We had vocals, and it was kind of like a metalcore band. It was like very aggressive music, the screaming vocals. But I was doing some advanced guitar technique, and Animals as Leaders basically was Reflux kind of came to a halt, and I wanted to go to music school to learn more music theory. So I went to the Atlanta Institute of Music, and while I was there, the label Prosthetic that put out Reflux offered me an opportunity to do like a solo guitar album. And I was a little shy at the time because I had never written full-blown guitar music, let alone a whole album. But it kind of was perfect timing, because being at music school, you're learning all these concepts and you're expanding your grasp of the instrument. And so I decided to take that opportunity and put out something called Animals as Leaders, which in effect was my solo album. I just wanted the perception to be that it was a band. So yeah, I didn't want to do like the Tosin Abasi experience. I wanted to do, because I was inspired by, Liquid Tension Experiment and bands that were instrumental, that had like killer lineups. Like everyone in the band was a virtuoso in their own right, but the lineup remained fixed, and the outcome was like more than just the sum of its parts. And so yeah, Animals as Leaders is basically a veiled solo project.
And it sort of just took on life of its own, as it were, huh?
Yeah, we released it at a time where there was a healthy community of extended range guitar players, and recording software had made recording at home really viable. You could produce recordings that sounded like you had a huge budget and you paid, some, well-known engineer, but it was maybe sampled acoustic drums and, so I worked with Misha Mansour, who's in a band called Periphery, and he was really adept at recording software. And we had like virtually no budget at all, but we were able to produce something that sounded like a real record. And there was a lot of communities like 7string.org and a lot of, online communities that if you posted what you were working on, people would kind of share it around. And so we actually leaked the album for free about a year before Prosthetic ever released it. And it gained a lot of traction on these message boards and stuff like that. And so it was really cool to have a reciprocal relationship with the listeners in the same community.
Yeah, that's really wild.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part of it is you can try to create that on your own, but there's some luck involved, isn't there?
Yeah. There's a definite X factor to timing and your ability to have exposure and maybe who you know. And yeah. And it's kind of funny how much of that you can't really plan for. Sometimes you just intersect with the right variables and they benefit you.
So tell me a little bit about some of your favorite projects that you've worked on. I know that's kind of like picking your favorite children, but you've done some incredible things, and I wish that we had all the time in the world to talk about all of them. But for you, I kind of wonder what's most important or has been instrumental for you.
Yeah, I mean, the first Animals as Leaders album was, I think, the first time I was really able to get what I heard in my head out in a way that exceeded the expectations. And my friend Misha, the producer, he had a lot to do with that. We share a lot of the same musical ideas, and when we don't share them, he was able to contribute things that really cohered everything together. But yeah, that I feel like Animals as Leaders is kind of like my passion project. So it would be the most, it would sit at top. But I did some touring with Steve Vai and Zach Wilde and Yngwie Malmsteen and Nuno Betancourt under Generation X. And those guys are personal heroes of mine. And so that would definitely be on the list of favorite projects, because it's like to be asked to join these icons on stage is something that like the teenage me would have never believed. And it was just like mind blowing. So, working with Steve Vai directly on stage and seeing Yngwie every day and seeing Zach and Nuno was like, it's really cool actually. So that is like, bucket list level experience,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Back to your recording experiences. At what level are you involved with the recording process?
It's a good question. I avoided really having to know anything about recording just because I was much better at guitar than mixing. And so I would always just try to set it up to where I could just play with an engineer who understood what I was going for, but could translate that stuff into the recordings. At this point, because of COVID, I actually took it as an opportunity to get better at recording software. So I can make pretty decent demos just for songwriting purposes with like Logic is what I've been using lately.
And how are you finding that experience?
I think it's great. I think a lot of guitar players are very focused on their craft, which makes sense. But when you start recording, you start to understand that maybe your guitar tone actually needs to work in the larger context of a mix, or maybe your timing or intonation isn't quite as good as you thought it was, or I just think having a producer or engineer's perspective is beneficial to every musician, no matter what they play, because engineers or producers are usually trying to consider the full package. And so I think as individual musicians, we're very focused on our own role, and it's not always that we are thinking about the entirety of the end result. And so it has influenced the way I make my tones now, and just, it's a holistically sort of beneficial skill to have.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, that's really an important concept. Although, as you say, if you're an instrumentalist, you really want to focus on your craft and your own style. So to broaden that, I think it takes a little bit of practice probably and a different mindset.
Yeah, and there's so much work to do on your instrument, no matter if you're already adept. There's a lifetime of work, and there's only so much time in the day. So I think there becomes this battle of dividing your time between your instrument and maybe the computer. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I would love to talk about the Abashi concept and how that came about. Where did that first originate?
Um, it originated when I was still an Ibanez artist. I had a signature guitar out with them, and they allowed me to design a new body shape, and they were going to put that out. And so we were prototyping this new shape that I have had conceived of, and I just realized that the Ibanez has such a large, um, their scale is so large that I only, I was a priority, but it had to be fit into a much larger set of priorities, and minor changes to the instrument would take quite a bit of time, and even things like adding components like locking tuners or a mini toggle switch, you kind of, by the time it becomes a retail product, you've multiplied 3 or 4 times the cost of that individual component, just because of how the structures are set up. And I felt very connected to the body design, and had I felt that I wanted it to be more than like a single model. I felt like I wanted the people to have the option of a bunch of finishes and a bunch of configurations. And eventually, living in Southern California, there are small manufacturers of musical instruments here. And so I was able to connect with people who can make guitars, and I just kind of stepped out on my own. And it was, had I known how complex that is, I don't know that I would have done it. If I could go in a time machine and tell myself, I think I was sufficiently naive, which was a good thing because it's a pretty bold move to make. And so it's good that I was just kind of like optimistic and motivated. And, I've been through some hardships with it, but I've learned a lot, and we're in an incredible place now. Like, we had an amazing year, our best year ever. And seeing these instruments in people's hands is something that is very different than just writing music. It's a different type of creative process that connects with people, and it has been really fulfilling.
So when did the company officially start?
I think we were at NAMM 2018.
That's right. Okay. I was there. I remember that. Yeah. I was excited about it too, because I thought there's a lot of energy when there's new products out. And of course, you were really excited and playing, and that was really a lot of fun. Tell me what that experience like for you.
It was cool. I'd never been a vendor at NAMM before. It was very humble beginnings. There was a scramble to get, there was a lot of logistics to having a booth, just as far as like how you design it and the booth materials and all this stuff. We got better at doing NAMM. Our last year NAMM was really, really awesome for us. We partnered with Horizon Devices, and I mean, it was kind of crazy. Like, I actually am at my NAMM booth the entire time. And like, I actually brought my personal pedal board and amplifier for people to try the guitars with. And I would just be there, like, making sure that, the noise gate wasn't set too hard if someone was demoing a rhythm tone, or if, like, making sure people knew that, hey, pull the volume knob, there's 2 voices to these pickups, or whatever it was. Like, I'm seriously like connected to the product. And so, yeah, NAMM is like, it's very tiring because it's like I'm there the entirety of the time at the booth, but it's a great experience.
Well, you're in good company, by the way. As the music historian, I've looked at this, and I can tell you firsthand that there's been a number of innovators who started their companies who sat in their booth the entire time. Leo Fender comes to mind. So you're in good company, my man. And it's great to have you a part of NAMM. I'll tell you, you have a great energy, and I love your products. Tell me a little bit about the concepts. What was the first thing that you offered, and what was the thought behind it?
I'll show you. Let's see. This is a Lorada. It is a multi-scaled 8-string guitar. And basically, the design approach to this was to try to make the extended range guitar a bit more approachable for guys transitioning from maybe, 6 or 7 string. So you'll notice a lot of the neck is actually contained in the body. Like this upper bout is actually kind of extends quite far into the neck of the guitar. This has the effect of reducing the overall span of the instrument as far as like how far your arm will travel away from your torso. And it centers you in a way that's really nice for weight balance and for playing in the upper register. Another thing is the bevels, beyond being aesthetic, they actually reduce mass and they allow for a more flush position of your forearm against the face of the guitar when you're picking and stuff like that. Down here is a cutaway that allows for a classical seated position or a traditional seated position. And even when you're standing, sometimes I'll put my leg on like the riser, or sorry, on the monitor, and I'll use this as a way to position the guitar beneficially. This guitar has a set neck, and you'll notice this cutaway here allows for extreme upper fret access. I can get all the way up here with no problems. And we choose the lightest materials we can because I feel like lighter woods kind of receive the energy imparted from the strings a bit more readily, and it resonates sympathetically. And also for your back and for long practice sessions, it's nice to have a guitar that isn't too heavy. Another feature would be the multi-scale. I don't know if you noticed that the frets are slanted. This basically allows for a longer scale length on the bass strings than the scale length is on the treble strings. So this starts at 25 and a half, which is like kind of like a traditional electric guitar scale length. And as you go lower in tone and strings, you extend the fingerboard to over 27 inches. But it's all on the same fingerboard, which is nice. It also has a benefit of, I don't know if people think about this, but when you're playing guitar, your arm is actually at an angle. And as you traverse the neck, if you didn't move your elbow, you would actually get a natural fanning motion. And so the fan frets have an ergonomic benefit of actually tracing the same sort of arc that your arm would make. And they have the benefit of that timbral effect of having the lower strings be longer. So they have a tighter, more focused tone. And then I worked with Fishman to do these Fishman Fluence pickups, which is a new technology and magnetic pickups that they've developed. And they're really remarkable. They have tons of clarity, and they're dual voice. So each one has 2 voicings. And we use individual string saddles. And yeah, there are some aesthetic choices that make it look, I think something worthy of the year 2020 and beyond, Yeah, that's the vibe.
I know one of the concerns that guitar makers have when you start adjusting too much of the original design, it can play havoc on the sound. Did you have issues with that, and how did you compensate?
We stuck pretty closely to tone woods that we know are easy to work with as far as the machines are concerned and have stability because, as a touring musician, you really want stability out of your instruments. And then we didn't really try to reinvent anything sonically. We just tried to enhance what existed. So we didn't hit any real curveballs, but this 8-string guitar does exist outside of the traditional guitar space. And so it was an opportunity to make something that wasn't quite being made as readily as the traditional 6-string guitar. So yeah, there's some freedoms. We do make a slightly more traditional instrument. This is our Space T, and it's basically like a futuristic Telecaster, which is cool. This one has the Fishman Fluence pickups as well, but these are Greg Koch's signature set. They have a setting for almost like an underwound pickup, and then you push this button and it becomes like a hotter different voicing. And it's cool because for us it's like an updated Telecaster with some of these cool same body style and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's really awesome.
thanks.
So have you found that there's amps that work better with that, your guitar products than others, or not necessarily?
I mean, there's preference, but you could plug these things into a Fender Twin and the sound is incredible. Like I said, with the pickups, it isn't a divergence from traditional guitar tone. It's like, it reminds me of like if you ever get a new TV or a new phone and the screen is slightly higher resolution than before, and you didn't notice that your previous generation was a little dim, and then you got this one and there's that incremental boost in resolution, but fundamentally you're looking at the same stuff. That's what I feel about the Fluence. It doesn't depart. It just is a sharper image of what the tones you're used to hearing.
Yeah, very interesting. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next? You have ideas of another product?
We're always kicking around ideas. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to wait till the next NAMM to you know how it goes. But yeah, we want to expand our product line. Not arbitrarily. We want to make sure each new product we put out makes sense. But we've had such a positive reception to what we're doing, and we do have some ideas. So I would just say to people listening, keep your eyes open for the new stuff we have coming.
Yeah, that's really cool. Very, very slick. I'm kind of curious if you don't mind backing up just a little bit on the locking tuners. Is there options now that are available that weren't before when you first started?
I'm not sure, but I do know that it seems that there's been an explosion of small businesses that are innovating in all domains of guitar production. So whether it's electronics or strings or entire guitars or stainless steel frets or locking materials, you can find someone using titanium to make their bridges in Hungary. You know what I mean? And the internet allows for you to connect with these innovators. So I think the answer to your question would be yes. So yeah, it's a cool time to be producing instruments because I feel like it's a renaissance of ideas and resources.
And speaking of this time, I'd love your thoughts about the pandemic and what that's been like for you. And you mentioned it earlier as being an opportunity to learn, which is great. What other thoughts do you have?
Well, one of the thoughts I had is that it's likely that this thing was present at NAMM last year. If you think about it.
Isn't that scary?
Yeah, no one knew, but here we are in the convention center with tens of thousands of people from all over the world in January, and then come February, we're hearing all these news reports, right? So it's kind of like, but NAMM is yeah. So when I think of COVID, I think maybe the first experiences of it might have been as early as January, but beyond that, it is a thing I never would have predicted. Like all of these, um, literally no one can perform in front of a crowd, and to even congregate with your own band and maybe producers is kind of a thing that is risky and you have to really consider. And I think for musicians, we're hit in a very vulnerable and specific way because we need to be able to travel and get in front of large crowds as like the crux of how we do what we do. And yeah, I'm afraid of all the up and coming bands that were had a lot of momentum, and a lot of that depended on their ability to tour and get support tours, and just basically all of that being put on ice for over a year. Not to mention a lot of the booking agents and independent venues and booking agencies and managers. I think there's been a lot of pivoting. Unfortunately, I think we might lose some vulnerable people who were making music their life, and maybe it won't be able to survive being put on ice for over a year. um, on the positive end, I think if you are a musician who is touring constantly, it was probably a welcome pause and an opportunity to be stationary for a very long period of time with no choice. And so you're not living out of a suitcase and doing, over 200 shows a year anymore. You're kind of, forced to, you know, focus on what's in front of you in a way. And so I've definitely used it as an opportunity to develop things that I think I was putting on hold because of all the touring. And so I've written a lot of music, gotten better at recording, yada yada yada. And then the last thing that might be positive is that I think we took certain freedoms for granted. I live in LA, and there's constant entertainment to the point where I would maybe not even go to a show because I felt that there'd be another one next week or whatever the case is. And now I'm kicking myself for not going to a lot of those. And I actually hope that when performances return, people are going to almost show up more than they were before, because we realize how valuable it is to be able to stand in a crowd and see a live performance.
Yeah, I certainly feel that way. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the message now should start being get out there, as soon as we can. I think we need to show how important live music is by participating.
Totally. And I think that will be the case. I noticed the rise in festival culture in the United States. Like, it's almost like every year we'd have more and more festivals. There was Coachella and Stagecoach and South by Southwest, and it just kept, multiplying. And so I hope that when, reality opens back up, that same growth will continue.
So here's a big question, but I think it helps with the concept that we have in encouraging people to become music makers and get involved with music making. I wonder for you, Tosin, what is it like for you to have music in your life?
It's invaluable. Music is a universal expression of all cultures, and it also can transcend culture, and it can be transformative in real time. It can change your mood, it can bring back memories, it can inspire you. And I just think it's a feature of our experiences that I think is necessary. I think human expression is super important and necessary, and music is like I mean, you can watch a toddler who's pre-verbal start to move rhythmically to music. So I think that illustrates there's a foundational connection to it. And I think it's something that I love to see thrive and I love to create.
Well, I sure hope that you've enjoyed the program today. I want to pause for just a minute to thank the amazing people I get to work with every day, the oral history team. Thank you guys for all your help and support, and there's a lot more to come.